Good morning, dear students. Today we continue Chapter 9, Living Organisms and Their Surroundings. In Part 1 video, we studied about what is habitat, what are the various types of habitats. Then we studied what is adaptations, and lastly we studied adaptations of the plants and animals in different habitats. In this Part 2 video, we will study about the characteristics of the living things. Plants, animals, human beings, we all are the living things. Okay, if we take the example of this whiteboard, marker, pen, table, chair, bag, building, these are the non-living things. How we can identify that it is a living thing or a non-living thing? There are some characteristics. Okay, there are some characteristics of the living beings which makes them different from the non-living things. On the basis of these characteristics, we can identify that this object is a living thing or a non-living thing. So let's start. First is nutrition. All living things need food. Okay, all living organisms, they need food for their survival. If we take the examples of the plants, plants have the ability to prepare their own food. Plants prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis. So we call the plants as autotrophs because they have the ability to prepare their own food. If we talk about the human beings and the animals, we are dependent on others for our food. For example, we are dependent on the plants and animals for the food. So we are known as heterotrophs. But all living things need food for the survival. Next is growth. All living things grow. For example, if there is a baby who has just taken the birth, you will notice that after few months there will be growth in the baby, and after few years the baby will grow into the adult. In your books, you can see on page number B9, you can see the growth in the humans has been shown. First the baby was so small, you can see the continuous growth in the baby. Okay, you can see here the growth in the humans has been shown. First the baby was small, then the baby turned into adult. So all living things, they grow, whether it is plants or animals or human beings. If you take the example of the plants, here you can see that this is a seed. Okay, after germination you will see that a seedling. This is the seedling. Okay, the seed has got turned into the seedling. After few days you will notice the seedling has grown into a plant, and after few years the small plant, it will turn into a big tree. Okay, so whether it is humans or animals or the plants, all living things, they grow. But if we take the example of the non-living things, for example, this whiteboard, marker, building, do they grow? No, they do not grow. If you will see this whiteboard after 1 year, the size of this board will be as it is. Okay, it is not going to grow in the size or shape. So only the living things grow, and the living things have the ability to self-repair. Sometimes while playing, you might have known, sometimes while playing you get injured. You might have seen after few days, your wounds, they get healed. Okay, how? Because we living things, we need food for our survival. When we eat food, so the food provides nourishment to the body. Okay, because of which our wounds, they get healed. So the living things, they have the ability of the self-repair. But if we see this growth, in case of the living beings, it is irreversible and permanent. Irreversible means once a child has grown into an adult, the child, it cannot again become the small baby. Okay, once a baby has grown into an adult, then that adult cannot again become the small baby. Okay, so this growth in the living being, it is irreversible. Non-living things, they do not grow. Okay, as I gave you the example of this whiteboard and the marker, they will remain as it is even if you see it after few months or after 1 year. Okay, but there are some non-living things that can grow. For example, building. Okay, height of the building can grow. Okay, then what is the difference? Why? The building is growing in the height, but for this we are adding the things externally. Building is not growing on its own. We are adding some things, because of which we are adding some things like cement. We are using some things like cement, sand, bricks, etc. Because of which, and the human labor, because of which the building is growing in the size. But the growth in case of the building, it is external, because we are adding the things externally and it is reversible. Reversible means something that can be bring back to the previous state. For example, one building has been made. Okay, the same building, it can be demolished also. Okay, so in case of the non-living things, the growth, it is external and it is reversible. I hope this is clear. But in case of the living things, the growth, it is internal and it is irreversible. Okay, but in case of the living beings, the growth is internal. How internal? We are eating the food. Food contains various types of nutrients. Okay, and these nutrients, they are responsible for the growth of the body. And the growth in the living beings, it is irreversible. Irreversible means which cannot be turned to the something that cannot be again turned to the previous state. After this, next is respiration or breathing. All living things, they respire. If we take the examples of the human beings, okay, but before this, let me explain this. All living beings need energy for their life activities. Okay, we all need energy to do our day-to-day activities. From where we do get this energy? We get this energy from the food. But how? We know that we human beings, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Okay, so this inhaled oxygen, it is utilized by the body so as to release energy from the food that we eat. Okay, and this process is known as the respiration. The process in which the inhaled oxygen, it is utilized to release energy from the food that we eat. Okay, this process is known as the respiration. All living things, they respire. Okay, like we human beings, we are breathing air. Okay, we are inhaling or exhaling the air through the nostrils. Okay, but in case of the plants, how do they breathe? They breathe with the help of the pores called stomata. Here in your book, you can see on page number B9. You can see here, these are the stomata. Stomata means very minute holes, very small pores in the on the underside of the leaf. Underside means, for example, this is the leaf. For example, this is the leaf, this is the upper side and this is the lower side. So stomata are found on the underside, on the lower side of the leaves. The stomata, they are the very small pores through which the gaseous exchange takes place. We know that the plants, they breathe, they take carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. Okay, they release oxygen. But the plants, they also respire. What I told you, in the respiration, oxygen is utilized to release so as to obtain the energy from the food that we eat. Okay, now there may be one confusion that plants, they to produce oxygen, but in respiration we use oxygen. Yes, plants, they take carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. Okay, they take carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen during the process of the photosynthesis. But plants, they also respire. Okay, because in the respiration, oxygen is utilized, but the amount of the oxygen that is utilized by the plant during this process of respiration is very small as compared to the oxygen that they are releasing in the atmosphere. Okay, all living things, they need energy for their daily activities, and from where we get this energy? We get this living things, they get this energy because of the process known as respiration. Okay, now coming to the next, excretion. We know that all living things, they need food for its survival. So all the food that we eat is not used up by the body. So the unused food that needs to be released out. Okay, so the unused components, they need to be released out from the body. So this process of getting rid of the waste by living organisms is known as excretion. Or in simple words, the process of removal of waste from the body by the living organisms, it is known as excretion. In humans and the other animals, the waste, it is released in form of the sweat, urine, and in form of the solid waste. Okay, that is known as excreta. If we talk about the plants, how do they release the waste? Okay, some plants, they release the waste products as secretion through the stomata. Okay, but some plants, they release in form of a thick fluid called latex. You can see here in your book, You can see here this white thick fluid, it is coming, okay, from the plant. You can see it is coming out. So this is some container has been adjusted here so that this thick fluid, it can get collected in this. Okay, this thick white fluid is known as latex. So after understanding excretion, next is the reproduction. The living organisms, they reproduce. What is the meaning of reproduction? Reproduction is the process by which the living organisms, they produce young ones of its own kind. Okay, all the plants and the animals, they reproduce, and what does it mean? They produce their young ones. So the process of producing young ones of its own kind is known as reproduction. In plants, how do the plants they reproduce? Plants, they reproduce either through seeds or some other plant parts. Okay, in human beings, they give birth to the baby. Okay, but there are some animals that lays eggs. Okay, like hen, birds, etc. So all the living beings, they reproduce, whether it is plants or animals. Okay, reproduction means producing the young ones of its own kind. Let us see some more characteristics of living beings. Next is movement. All living things show movement. Okay, if we take the examples of human beings and animals, we can move from one place to another. Okay, but plants are also living things. Plants, they cannot move from one place to another. They are fixed to soil. They are fixed at one place to the soil. But the parts of the plants, they show movement. When wind blows, we have seen the leaves and the branches of the tree, they show movement. Okay, so all living things, they show movement. Yes, it is true that plants, they cannot move from one place to another, but the parts of the plants, they show movement. If we talk about the non-living things like bus, car, truck, they can also move. But the car, bus, truck, etc., they cannot move on their own. As we human beings, we can move on our own. Okay, so we are living things, but the non-living things, yes, they can move, but they cannot move on their own. So all living things, they show movement. Next is respond to stimuli. If there is any change in our surroundings, our body responds to these changes, and these changes are called stimuli. For example, if you touch any sharp object, immediately we withdraw our hand. Okay, and sometimes if you touch any hot object, then immediately we take our hand back. Okay, so our body, it responds to the stimuli like hot object, touching any hot object, touching any sharp object, etc. Sometimes when you come from the outside where there is bright sunlight, when we come inside the room, for a moment we are not able to see anything. Okay, so our body responds to light also. If we take the examples of the plants, do they also respond to the stimuli? Yes, they also respond to the stimuli. We all have noticed, you all might have touched the mimosa plant. Mimosa plant is the touch me not plant. In your book, you can see on page number B11, you can see these are the leaves of the mimosa plant. Okay, before touching the leaves are like this. Okay, but the moment you will touch the leaves of the mimosa plant, you will notice the leaves, they will get curl up like this. Okay, so the plants, they also show response to the stimuli. If we talk about the animals, you might have seen, if you flash light toward the cockroach runs away. Okay, so the animals, they also respond to the stimuli. If we talk about the plants, okay, the roots of the plants, we know that they grow downwards in the soil. Okay, this tendency of the roots of the plant to grow downwards, it is known as the geotropism. But if we talk about the stem of the plants, the stem of the plants, they grow towards sunlight. This response of the plants towards the sunlight, we call it phototropism. In your book, on page number B12, you can see activity 9.8. See here, this is a small potted plant. You can see. Keep this potted plant near the window from which sunlight can come. Okay, so keep this plant here for few days. You will notice that after few days, the stem, the stem of this plant, it has bent towards the sunlight. Okay, so this response of the stem of the plants towards sunlight, it is known as the phototrophism. So we saw that all living organisms, they respond to the stimuli. Okay, it may be temperature, light, touch, etc. Now coming to the next, lifespan. All living organisms, they have a definite lifespan, or we can say life cycle. That means the organisms, their life has some beginning and an end. Okay, for example, when a baby takes birth, after that the baby grow into adult. Okay, and after a few years that will grow into an old person, and finally the person will die. Okay, so you can see here there is some beginning and some end, and the period during which the person completes his life cycle, this is known as the lifespan. For example, if any person has taken birth and the person lived up to 60 years, so what will be the lifespan of that person? 60 years. Okay, so all the living organisms, they have a definite lifespan or life cycle. In the last, I would like to say that it is very difficult to give an exact definition of the life. We can just tell some biological functions that the living things, they perform these biological functions, and the non-living things, they cannot perform them. Okay, so this is all for today.